Okay. Okay, now we're in the session. I'm already opening the webinar, but we're gonna admit attendee on the dot as well. Okay. Oh, we have people start to coming in now. Hi everyone. Nice to meet you all. Hi Andy. Hi Daniel. Hi Emric. Hi Johannes. Hi Carl. Hi Anna. Thank you for coming in so early. Really nice to have you here. Oops. E27. Yeah, we're still waiting for about 5 minutes. So feel free everyone to just wait for a few moments and actually enjoy and take a couple of snacks and water so that we can enjoy the session together. All right. Ooh. Hello there, Stephen. And of course, everyone, while we're waiting as well, please, yeah, nice to meet you, Andy. Hi to you all as well. Don't forget, if you have anything that you wanted to share, this is an interactive webinar. So please use the chat function down below. Just what Andy did just now as well. And also use the Q&A function so that we can also take a look on your questions. Yeah, so we're still going to wait a couple more minutes before the session to start. We're gonna start on the dot. So don't forget to grab a couple of drinks or snack. All right, good afternoon. Oh, hi there, Stephen. Yeah, we're so happy to see some familiar faces and names. Happy to have you join our webinar as well. Oh, just had lunch, Andy. That's good. A few more snack doesn't hurt anyone, yeah. Oh, people start coming in as well. Hi, Maulana. Hi, Akbar. Hi, Carl. As well. Oh, we have a couple from the Avon team as well. Hi, Wei Wei. Hello, Jojo. Oh yeah, hi, Stephen. Kind reminder for everyone as well. Generally, this is an interactive webinar, so feel free to use the chat and to see. Can we do roll call? Where did everyone joining from? I'm from Jakarta, Indonesia. Anyone here from Singapore? Or anyone else? Oh, oh yeah, Shu joining from Singapore. Oh, hi, Amy. Oh, Surabaya. Nice. Another Indonesian. Wow. From Singapore / Shenzhen, are you in two places in the same time? Wow. Are you teleporting? That's great. Yeah. Oh, I think people are still just starting to join in as well. Oh, we have Johannes Dodo as well. Hi, Johan. Hi, Emric. Nice to see everyone. Oh, hi, Moon. I think you joined like a couple of our last webinar as well, if I'm not wrong, right? Happy to have you here again. I think basically we have quite a diverse team, but don't worry, I'm gonna have a poll later on to us where everyone comes from. I don't know, maybe there's a couple of alien in our audience joining from Mars. Okay, I think people are still joining in. Let's wait for a couple more minutes. Okay. Yeah, careful. UFOs, alien. NASA is watching, Andy mentioned. Who knows? Maybe NASA and NASA also joining our webinar as well. Okay. Well, I think people are still start to joining in. I think I see a couple of more names actually also start to join our session. But we're gonna start pretty soon and on the dot. So no worries, anyone. Once again, those that just joined, thank you so much to join another one of our session with E27. And today we're essentially going to live stream this on Facebook as well and going to record this session. Um, but please do use the chat function and the Q&A functions as well, because it's an interactive webinar and we're definitely very happy to have all of your questions and any kind of like comments also shared with us. All right, so now without further ado, uh, I'm going to start the webinar. So welcome everyone to the Surviving the Startup Winter using data to improve efficiency and increase revenue. It is a joint webinar with Avon, and we have awesome panel today from all across ASEAN, which I will introduce in a few more moments. But before we essentially start the webinar, a couple of house rules for everyone to make this session more interactive and productive. Please join the discussion. As I mentioned, use the chat box. We want to know your insight. We want to know who you are. And of course, open to any question. Use the Q&A widget. I think everyone can see right down below on the right side, the Q&A widget. Use it to ask any kind of question, okay? We'll look forward to it. And of course, this webinar is recorded and also live stream. So no worries if you miss something, you can always revisit it. All right, so just to make this interactive, we actually really want to know where you guys are from and also basically a couple of details. So we're launching a few questions. Please answer it. First question, where are you guys from? Can any one of you guys see the poll? Panelists, if you want to click the poll as well, feel free to do that. So there's a first question, where are you from? Second question, what verticals industries you're currently in? And last but not least is, what's the most important priority on your company right now? Okay, oh, people are starting to share their answer. Good to know, good to know. I'm still gonna wait for a couple of more minutes. Oh, I can see that majority of you do come from Singapore, some from Vietnam as well, and some from Mars, as I know as well. Oh, we have a lot of people from SaaS, verticals, and other tech. And for the most important priority on your company, I can see that everyone is a dominant answer of increasing revenue. Okay, so essentially, I'm gonna end the poll now. Oh, people are still answering, no worries. But I'm gonna end the poll now and just share it to you guys. There you go. You guys can see it here as well. Panelists, you can definitely see the poll as well. So as we can see, everyone are looking forward to find ways to increase their revenue. So without further ado, now is the time for me to basically introduce to our awesome panelists. So let's start first and foremost from Mr. Rohit from AirAsia. Mr. Rohit, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Selma and the entire E27 team for inviting me to this panel. Look forward to having a great discussion with everyone here. My name is Rohit. I've been a part of AirAsia for the last 2.5 years. I guess in aviation industry, we can divide the time period into pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and post-pandemic. So I joined just before the pandemic started. Currently, I'm heading data at AirAsia Super App. I'm sure everyone knows of AirAsia as Southeast Asia's largest low-cost airline with more than 200 airplanes. Couple of years ago, AirAsia decided to diversify into newer business streams to be able to nullify the impact of the pandemic. And AirAsia Super App was born as a result. Currently, look at all data practices across AirAsia Super App. Look forward to having a great discussion here. Thank you, Selma.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rohit. I think everyone here already know who AirAsia is. So next is Max from SensorFlow. Okay, Max, the floor is yours.
Well, hello everyone. Pleased to meet everyone. My name is Max from SensorFlow. We founded SensorFlow in 2016, December, as part of the EF Accelerator, Entrepreneur First is that. And we help buildings optimize their energy consumption, mostly in the hospitality industry. So for us, it's very similar. There's a pre-pandemic, in the pandemic, and post-pandemic time being in the hospitality industry. Yeah, being able to sort of manage our IoT infrastructure in those buildings.
Thank you so much, Max. And last but not least, Mark from Ivan.
Hi, everyone. First, let me congratulate Rohit on the announcement of the Super App initiative from AirAsia. So I'm the first hire for Ivan in Southeast Asia, right? And this is startup number 9 for me. I have been a co-founder of startup as well. So hopefully I'll get a chance to share more of the experience, as well as I'm really looking forward to the interactive discussion that we will have in this session.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Max, and Mr. and Rohit as well for your kind introductions. So I think pretty much everyone now know who you are, and of course, everyone feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn, on any social media platform that they have, and say hi to them. I'm sure they're very happy to also connect with you. Okay, so now basically to the heart of the discussion. Now is the time for us to discuss for this webinar. So first and foremost, I think we're going to as a reminder, we're going to do an open discussion. So please, everyone, if you have any kind of question, even essentially during the session, we're actually very happy to answer them. So first question, we're going to open the floor to Mr. Rohit from AirAsia. So we actually hear a lot right now, right, that winter is coming. Currently more and more startup founders nowadays are looking to find a way to be more efficient, increase their revenue, extend ways. They are always trying to find ways to have smart workflow, seamless interactions. But not everyone knows about data. So as a simple question to start this webinar, why do you think data is important and how impactful data could be? And essentially any other main challenges on using data as well?
Sure. Thank you, Selma, for this insightful question. I'll share my own personal views, which I've learned from being a part of AirAsia as well as other companies, as well as advising other startups. Everyone knows data is important. That's not really a question that's valid anymore right now. In this digital native stage, data is the new oil, as they all say. But really, why is data so important is a question that I've thought about multiple times. See, data at the end of the day, I believe represents the truest picture of what has happened. It's a reflection of what people have done in the past, what has conspired in the past. It's the closest form of truth that I'm aware of. At the same time, data is limited. The data only talks about what has happened in the past. It cannot talk about what has happened in the future because that is something that no one is aware of. But there is a strong element of causal relationship. People's behavior tends to repeat. What they've done in the past is a very strong indicator of what they will do in the future. The kind of hotels that I used to stay in the past would probably be a good enough indicator for identifying what are the kind of hotels that I would stay in the future. And this is one simple data project that we take to look at what, for example, are the kind of hotels that a user has stayed in the past, and use that to be able to build a recommendation engine to identify what kind of hotels would the user stay in the future as well. That being said, it's very data is very prone to misinterpretation because there are multiple ways of being able to look at it. And as a result, it's very important to apply the correct lenses to be able to really understand what the data is telling us. So this would mean that we need to be aware of the underlying circumstances that led to the generation of this data. I'll give you a fun example, that problem that I faced at AirAsia. So one of the projects that we were trying to work upon was to identify what kind of meal preferences do people have when they board a flight on AirAsia. So when, for example, when you board a flight on AirAsia, you have the ability to order in-flight meals. What we realized is the meals that people were ordering would be a strong indicator of what they would order in the future as well. But the meals that they were ordering were limited by the meals that we were offering to the users at that point of time. And hence, understanding what subset of the entire set of meals are available to ordering by a user is extremely important. And hence, yes, data has the ability to create immense amount of value for any organization, small or large, but it has to be viewed at proper lenses. It has to be looked at in the context in which the data was generated.
I think you bring a really good point there, that basically any organization, right? Like we don't really, you know, limit ourselves to early stage founders or like, already growth stage founders. Everyone can leverage the use of data, right? Following that question, right? So this question is for Max, right? So as a company yourself and as a founder, as you mentioned, what are the common obstacle company usually face in terms of utilizing data as well? And have you ever found ways or case study where data actually increase your company's growth as well?
Definitely. So in terms of obstacles, what I find is the sort of biggest obstacle to get to a sort of proper data-driven culture in a company is the data literacy of the people in the organization itself. Sort of getting that awareness in what it means to use data for decision making, how to be structured about these things, is something that a lot of people are not aware of, and that is especially since it's often not quite straightforward how to use data, and often it's not quite accessible. That can put a barrier where a lot of people then sort of try to help themselves in ways where they don't take into account all the sort of like caveats and traps that you can fall into if you not look at the context and these kind of things. So I think being able to imprint into an organization data literacy and sort of common understanding of the value of source of truth management and these kind of things, really working with the people, is what is one of the biggest of challenges of getting to a data-driven culture in a company. And also just general, people often underestimate how difficult it is to create really truthful, good metrics. That there's often quite a long process, a lot of effort to get to the bottom of, because data is just data. There is quite a bit of process often required to turn data into actual information that you can then use for decision making. Because in long and short, like any organization is at its core the sum of the decisions that are being made inside of it, and data is what enables the information that you can use to make good decisions, and that in turn then leads to growth by definition. So this is sort of I don't have like a particular case study where we use data to grow any specific area, but sort of like going through a transformation for making data more accessible in our business to every member in the business has certainly improved our operational efficiency tremendously and our decision making as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I think you highlighted an important discussion there, the right metrics, right, as well. I think you highlighted that really well, Max. Any response to that, Mark, as well? And also wanting to know essentially on your end, Mark, from Ivan, from your different customers as well, any is it the same obstacle you see on your customer, or any other case study you want to share?
Yep, sure. I'll start off with the Ivan perspective first, right? And this is a poignant and topic that's close to our hearts, right? So our 4 founders, when they were developing a new business and application, and what they found is that they end up spending more time managing the databases, the data infrastructure for the business, than building up the applications. And that was how Ivan came about 6 years ago, right? That they see and a gap in the market, right? That companies, startups spend more time managing their database infrastructure or data infrastructure than building the business, focusing on the product market fit. And that's how we came about, right? So this is something that's very close to heart. And now, going through the different startup I work for, as well as working with other startups in the ecosystem, right? Data to most of them, if not all, right, is the most important ingredient in the business now, right? So we do work with startups in the FSI, in the logistics, in gaming, right? Every decision they make now is boiling down to the data that they have used, right? And we still see that a lot of these startups and companies are focused on fixing the pipes and not looking at the water that's flowing through the pipe, right? So we would like to really help this company now, instead of focusing on piping, really look at the water that's in the pipe, the data, and then how they're using the data. So for Ivan, we have done a survey recently, right, showing how the Southeast Asian startups, right, measure up or compared to the US counterparts, right? And we found that, in Southeast Asia, there's still a lot of work now on building the data infrastructure. Whereas in US, they are in a much more mature position. They are now really looking at monetizing the data, using the data to drive business insights, which will be the new business area that they want to go into by leveraging on the data that they have. Right, so I think it's quite interesting that, not just looking at the case studies, but what we are seeing is that every of the startups that we talk to now in the market are all looking at using revenue, and some of them have been, those that are really doing very well are the ones that can extract value from the data that they have. We're happy to share a little more insights into the startups and the people that we work with, right, later in the discussion.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. Like, I think a lot of founders will agree, like they have 100 million things on their mind and then their job, right? So kind of like I think we echoing the question that we have here, I think someone actually asked, as a non-tech background founder, what's the first step we need to do in order to build our digital infrastructure? And I think I'll hold that question for now, but I think I'm going to loop that back in order to answer that question to you, Mark, on that one. So essentially, as we already hear from our panelists here, the importance of data are now unquestionable, right? Everybody knows the importance of it as well. Everybody actually just wonder now, like, how exactly to adopt that, right? Or if you are already a data-driven company or a digital native company. So this is a question to both Rohit and Max, with Mr. Rohit first. We'd love to know, in your company specifically, right? Maybe you can share to our audience, does your company adopt a data-driven from the start, or is there any transformation period to be more data-driven? And in case like there's a transformation, do you find it essentially improve any efficiency, like Max mentioned before, or specific to even a revenue as well? Mr. Rohit?
So I'll answer this question from two contexts. One from AirAsia, the airline, and second from AirAsia, the super app. And this probably represents the wide variety of businesses that are out there. One would probably be a digitally native, which would probably be something similar to an AirAsia super app. And the other would be a regular business which uses digital and data to be able to improve efficiencies. And hence, probably the answer to both of them would represent the wide variety of problems that business owners might face. Starting with AirAsia, the airline. AirAsia started in the year 2001, more than 20 years ago now. And at that point of time, the focus of the founders was just on creating operational efficiency and branding and marketing, just to be able to sell enough seats, get enough revenue to be able to meet the ends meet at the end of the day, to be able to ensure that the salaries are paid to the pilots, the flight crew, to everyone, to ensure that there is one more day to be able to look forward to. So at that point of time, the focus was very clear, mostly on operations, mostly on revenues, mostly on cash flow management. Having said that, probably some of you might remember that AirAsia is probably the first airline within this region in Southeast Asia to start its own website to get people to book tickets, flight tickets directly, bypassing the OTAs, the online travel agents, to ensure that not only do customer is getting a bigger component of the customer experience within the AirAsia ecosystem, but also to ensure that we are able to provide the maximum service from just being a transportation company to being a ticket booking plus a transportation company as well. So that kind of vision is extremely important when someone is building an organization, because then they need to think about the problems that they need to solve, not just for today but also for tomorrow. So this kind of long-term thinking is extremely important and is something that is seen commonly across all the major successful companies across the entire world. Now, if I talk about AirAsia Super App, so work on AirAsia Super App started probably 3 years ago, but we really rolled it out probably a year and a half ago. And AirAsia Super App, in comparison to AirAsia the airline, is a digitally native organization. That means that we base our existence on our mobile app that resides on everyone's phones. And as a result, it's a fairly digital native organization, in the sense that we use data and technology to be able to drive our business. It's inseparable from the rest of the business. There were a large number of learnings that we had from running the airline that helped us identify what are the best practices that we need to identify to be able to build up while scaling up a new business. And those are some things that we decided to implement in place from the day one at AirAsia Super App. So that means before we even launched, we ensured that the data infrastructure was ready, the reporting system, the analytic tools, frameworks, everything was ready and established even before we launched the AirAsia Super App.
I think that's really insightful. I think everyone here definitely, remember that, like you mentioned, AirAsia is among the first who actually we can order ticket on their website, right? And essentially, I remember because I also ordered on your website as well back then. So I think impressive to know, essentially, kind of like, your step of actually using data to drive your business might be also the reason why you're among the most top companies at airlines right now as well in Asia, and how it drives your company. So in order to respond to this as well, from Max, any kind of like story or that you want to share as well, for this?
Story, I guess I can add a bit more to it from the sort of startup founder perspective, where it's sort of like right from the start of like very, very early stage companies. And in general, if you answer the question, should you adopt the data-driven policy as a company from the start, the answer is obviously yes, of course you should. But the honest answer is, will you actually do it? Most likely not. Because at that point, you are often very busy and you don't even have that much data yet recorded at the beginning. And you most likely also don't really understand your information model properly yet, because you're still learning a lot about the market that you're going in, about how your product is going to be adopted and these kind of things. However, having it at the back of your mind is very important. Sort of like know that there will come a point in the journey of your startup where you will find yourself struggling to understand what is real at the moment. So like cycling back to what Rohit said earlier, because that's what data is going to tell you. And at some point, it will become more and more difficult to keep a grasp on that. And that's where you then need to start looking really into your data model, into your information model as such, then start building the data infrastructure and sort of and get it. And so it really helps having that at the back of your mind to know that you need to identify that point when that happens, because otherwise you will end up introducing a lot of friction into your business process, and you will likely make bad decisions along the way because you don't know what is really the truth where you're at right now. And in terms of, I guess, more of a story with regards to data transformation. So for us, that point in time came about 4 years into the journey. Which was a bit slower than it probably is in the normal circumstances, but our business growth has been sort of slower because of COVID. So we managed to sort of like get by without. But at that point, we really sat down, built out our information model, tried to understand the data that we create and the data that we record, and then adopted a general sort of policy of embracing SQL and the universe around SQL and all the sort of amazing tools that come with it. And that has definitely really helped, because it enabled us to pull a business analytics layer into the business, which then gave access to all sorts of information to every employee in the business, which then sort of really sort of democratized the truth of where we're at across the business. So that was, yeah, it took a while to get through it, but it was definitely worth it.
I think you really gave a good perspective to our audiences here as well, because as a founder yourself who actually founded the company, you actually already adopt data policies from the, from the beginning of your company, right? In that sense.
No, I was saying like we kind of didn't. So the point I was trying to make, that if you're a founder, there's a lot of other things that you really care about at this point. Like you need traction, you need LOIs, you need to sell something, you need legal sorted out, you need to talk to your investors and all that kind of stuff. Like having structured Excel sheets or a database model or entity relationship model, it's not really at the top front. Maybe your developers have some of it, but it's not like sort of across the business. You probably hire a sales guy and he's going to go out gung-ho, try to sell as hard as possible. Like you haven't really figured out the structure of a sales funnel, pipeline management, all that yet, getting all the data that is required to sort of like figure out, is your pipeline healthy or not? Most likely you're just going to ask the sales guy and he's going to say, yes, everything is awesome. I have got great relationships with my client. Does he really? That's what data will answer to you. Doesn't really matter in the first year as much as it starts when you really scale and you sell consistently to a lot more people. And all of a sudden you have 10 salespeople and you can't just go and build that one-to-one relationship with everyone anymore. You need to sort of like have higher level metrics and reports to be able to quickly and efficiently assess what is real right now.
I think the key there, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you want to scale, there's no question, essentially, right? If you want to scale your company, yeah.
You will come to the point where you are like, this is all taking way too long. I need to know where I'm at right now. And I don't have time to go and ask my data scientist and wait for a week to get that information. And that's where data infrastructure and all that stuff comes in.
I think some of our audience might relate to that already as well. So, following that question, right, essentially, do you think founders, I think basically Max already answered the questions from the start, Laya, but maybe from Mr. Rohit's side, do you think like not only tech startup, right, like even normal corporate, do you think they actually should adopt, data infrastructure, like the right data infrastructure from the start? Like for example, it doesn't have to be like a tech company, like even a normal SMB company. Do you think it'll be useful for them to actually adopt data infrastructure from the start, Mr. Rohit?
So I agree with Max on large number of points that he mentioned. The question is very difficult to answer because the reason for existence of any organization, whether it's an SMB or a tech startup, is to provide value for its customers, to be able to identify a problem that the customers are facing, to identify a way to be able to solve it, and to identify a way to be able to monetize it, so that yes, customers find value in engaging with that startup, with that organization, and the organization finds a way to be able to keep the wheels churning to ensure that they keep on solving problems for larger and larger number of people. And this remains valid whether it's a small stage startup or a large scale organization. And this theorem is valid for any organization of any scale, any industry. Now, where does data fit into this? Directly speaking, unless the organization itself is providing data-based services, data helps in the background to be able to help the organization achieve it. But in the front end, there are other functions that are probably a bit more critical to be able to meet the customer's need. And hence, probably those are the ones that the organization definitely needs to focus on. There is absolutely no doubt about that. Having said that, sometimes some organizations become much more engrossed in the day-to-day operations that they probably skip looking at the long-term picture. wherein they just try to solve one problem after the other without really trying to identify what is the root cause behind the problems. To be able to do so, to be able to make a significant change in the operations from where they are to be able to reach where they want to be able to get that transformation required to be able to reach the next level of orbit, it's very important for any organization's founder to be able to take a step back and identify what the current state of operations are. And that answer comes from looking at data. How are my salespeople performing? What is my attrition rate? What's the churn rate? What are my top customers? What are their needs? What's my efficiency level? Where am I burning the most amount of cash? These are all kind of problems that can be solved by looking at data. And once the organization decides that yes, these are the questions that they need to solve, they hire a few data folks to be able to help solve those problems, then they will identify that the new baseline that they will be able to operate at will be significantly higher from where they were before. Now it becomes extremely important for the founders to have this at the back of their mind to be able to identify that yes, they will need to look at data to be able to solve tomorrow's problem. Today's problem, probably the more operational departments can solve, but tomorrow's problems can be solved only when we start looking at data. So it becomes very important for the founders to have it at the back of their mind that yes, data is extremely critical and yes, they will need to view it. And sometimes some of the decisions that need to be made when an organization is starting up tend to have significant impact down the line and probably not so much immediately. And this is a question that the founders need to answer. Are they building an organization for 1 year, for 10 years, for 100 years? If we look at what is the common thread connecting all of the successful organizations worldwide that have survived the crisis of 2008, the crisis of 2001, and any other crisis, it's what we will find is that they have relentless focus on efficiency, on improvements. And the key to that is that they understand where the current business operations are. And that's something that the data team can help identify for them. So yes, it's extremely crucial for an organization to be cognizant of the fact that data is critical to be able to achieve the next level of growth.
I can see basically, the commonalities from all the companies now, kind of like their perspective on data. And I actually found one question interesting on the Q&A right now that I think Max is trying to answer. Maybe Max, you want to answer live, like any pitfalls or common mistake founder usually face when, first doing digital transformation. They say that we find it challenging to do so as we know there are a few uncertainties to it. Any thoughts, Max?
I was gonna type something similar to the answer that I typed before. I think it's imperative that before you jump into the tech and infrastructure aspect of it, that you understand the data that you're interested in, the types of data. There's different types of data, time series data, relational data, unstructured data, videos, pictures, and probably a lot more. So really understanding what is it that you're dealing with, and also what other external data sources do you need and use to make your decisions in the business. Because once you really understand that, then you can, that will inform the choice of technologies that you need, which then in turn defines the infrastructure that you need this whole thing to run on. So don't go chasing credits on AWS or these kind of things, because that's great and it will help you in the short term. But I was sort of like saving that for the next question, but we are a great example of that. We got a shit ton of credits from AWS, and that basically led to our developers not caring about costs in any way, shape or form, and infrastructure complexity. And the bad awakening happened a lot sometime when we ran out of credit and all of a sudden faced with like more than 40K US dollars a month in bills on AWS services. So understand what you have, what you need, and what technology is suited to do that, and then make infrastructure choices. Don't just sort of like run with the marketing and lock yourself into any sort of vendor or technology without understanding what it is, what your use case actually is.
And I actually another question popped up that actually are quite interesting to follow on your statement as well, Max, and it also follows basically my last question to Mark, but I will bring it up now as well because I think it's quite interesting. To Mr. Mark, if we start implementing a data-driven approach for our company, when do you think we can start seeing the result of our revenue? I believe implementing this will be costly too. So I think it also follows to Max's statement about credit. Mark, any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it's a binary question, right? Like I'm not doing data now, I start doing data. Right? Most of the organizations, startups are using data in their business. It's about how much now you are able to leverage on the data that you have to develop insights into where you should be prioritizing the business, or where do you see the best product market fit of your services or products that you can now either expand the offering or attack a new customer segment so that you can drive revenue, right? It's not so much of a technology approach that I want to now go into data, I want to have a data-driven approach to your business, but it's something that you want to look at in terms of now on the business, how do you prioritize the business decisions, or looking at how you build the business based on the data that you're getting today, right? And of course, then when you start doing that, you'll start to realize that, oh, I need my data to be coming to me in a timely fashion, right? So that I can see what is really happening today, not data that is obsolete or data that's not relevant to me, data that's 6 months ago. So it is more both a technology approach, right, in terms of getting the data infrastructure ready to provide you with the necessary data that will help you to build your business insights, right, and your business decisioning. Yeah, but what I'm seeing now is that every startup, every organization will need to now really look at enabling informed decisions through a proper data infrastructure that enables them to get timely insights, right? So customers that are in FSI, the banking, right? Every transaction has to happen now, and they even have an additional load of in audit or compliance, right? Those that are in logistics now, that they need to track exactly where the delivery, the parcel is. But then on the gaming side, all this information about upselling, what's the next game, next feature, next level, has to be in a real-time interaction with the players so that they can have a much enriched experience, right? So all these are now very much driven by data, and how do you build process into that to aid, to help the business, right, to expand the services or to go into adjacent business segment. I hope that gives some initial context to this discussion about data-driven approach, right? And it really boils down to regardless of which segment you're in, you start to need to leverage on data to drive your business.
So in some point, it really depends on where your company and your company's goal at, right, Mark, in that sense. And to further add, yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, exactly, right? So if you are now in an early stage startup, you're still very much focused on building up the product market fit, then you're really always looking for evidence that you are able to get paying customers. Then the next question is, if I increase the cost, increase the price, how much more customers will I lose or will I gain? Right? So it's an informed decision that you have to now make based on the data, based on the statistics that you get from the operations, right? Or you could be now in a much more mature state, right? You're now looking at, like for example, you are now running a FSI company that actually provides loans. Then do you now have a segment within your customer base that you can offer buy now, pay later? How lucrative is that? Do you have the customer who's willing to do that for you? Right? This business development or business evolution of the company, right, has to be now driven from insights that you're able to drive from the data you have. Right? Otherwise, it's very much touch and go. But you can really do deep analytics now into your customer base based on the spending patterns, based on the transaction type. You can actually have a much more confident or much more informed decision or what to do next or to assess your business decision.
Can I add one thing to that also? Adopting a data-driven culture does not mean you'll see it only on your revenue side. Like you will also see it on your profit side because you will run more efficient, so your cost will go down. You will see it. I will echo Rohit's point. Effectively, if you don't, at some point you won't be here anymore. So it's not about getting your revenue up. It's also just about keeping it to be existing, because you have to make good decisions, and data is the only sort of like way how you can ensure that you consistently make good decisions. And one other superpower that I think that data has is it is able to take emotions out of decision processes, which is, I think, a really, really underestimated aspect of it. Because if you don't have data, you basically just dealing with what people believe is true. And if you're fighting beliefs, you end up in emotional discussions, and it's really hard to build consensus around it. But if you have the data that is able to give you the key metrics that you need for your business, decisions become easy, and your business as a whole will become a lot more agile, because you can just decide on the spot without emotions. So this didn't work, let's try that. That didn't work, let's try that. And that's how you sort of iterate to success. Otherwise, you will keep failing, fighting about, I think it's this, no, I think it's that, but I have seen this and I have read that article, and you're just fighting opinions, and that will not lead you to success.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, especially for a lot of our audiences who are founder who are actually looking to scale up. I think now is the time essentially also for them to see data as a decision they need to make to scale. So now that we essentially, I think, establish basically the importance of data, and have a lot of discussion on that. To Mark, any guidance on how to adopt the right digital structure? And I actually see that you already answered one question that I mentioned previously. We have a non-tech background founder here as well on our audience. So I think a lot of them are wondering basically what's essentially the first step needed in order to build digital infrastructure.
Right. So, I was a co-founder of startup myself as well, right? I only wish that I have insights back then, right? As a startup founder, you only know what you know. There's a lot of things that you're trying to figure out, right? As you grow the company. And one of the most important question is that you need to go through a growth to drive that growth, right? And you have to go through hyper growth to drive your customers acquisition. You have to drive transaction value, right? So some of the going through that process, right? If the good thing happen and you're really getting now customers coming into buying your services, right? And the transaction volume are growing. And the last thing you want is when you get this traction and you have a problem with your data infrastructure, your database or your application cannot support it, right? So one of the most important consideration is that as long you got to make sure is that your tech stack, your data infrastructure has to be able to scale on demand, right? And there are now technologies available in the market that you can now scale very quickly, horizontally and vertically, right? Without limits, and you don't want to get yourself locked into a specific proprietary technology for that, right? So just summarizing that very quickly is make sure that you do have the flexibility, you do have the reliability and the scaling available in your data infrastructure, so that when the good things happen, when you're finally getting traction, you're finally getting subscribers to buy your services, you are now not hit with another problem of having to scale up your application or your data infrastructure, right? So those decisions are very critical, right? So it's just making sure that when you are making decisions on the data infrastructure, make sure that there's no lock-in. Make sure that you can be deployed on any of the major public clouds so that you're able to move your infrastructure. When, like for example, right, when Max was saying, you can now choose the public cloud provider that is giving you credits, and then you can harness that and making sure that you don't utilize those to get yourself locked in. Right, that's very important. Second thing is look at open source as well. It's really now bring democratic access to the latest technology without having to pay license fees. Right, those days of licensed products from the Oracle, IBM, Teradata, Microsoft, those days, right, are very different now. You can access open source technologies to enable you to build the technology required to support your business. Right, so it's about open source, being able to be rolling out your business with no lock-in on the tech side, right? And the third thing that you want to think about is resources as well, especially with the downturn. So it's difficult now to really hire the resource and retaining them. And you also now, because of downturn, have to look at your cost management, right, of resources. So you probably will want to have more predictability by engaging in managed services so that you know what you're paying for particular service, rather than having to look at hiring directly yourself and also looking for specific expertise that are expensive. Right, so those are the key things in terms of resources, open source, and no lock-in. Those things that give you the flexibility, right, to build your business.
I think that's a really good first step for sure, because I think now I'm also a non-tech as well, so I think it'll give me a good next step for sure in order to adopt this. So so essentially we have a lot of couple of question and answers questions that comes from the audiences now. So I would like essentially to have a couple of minutes to discuss about the question before we go on. So the first question is from Anonymous, but I do know that we are now in the big data era and it's one of the most underrated currency. But how do we make sure that those data are secured? How can we protect the user? And as a user, how do I protect mine? I think this question I will diverge it to Rohit. Mr. Rohit, you want to share a couple of things on this? I think AirAsia have the a lot of personal data, I think including my ID card. The thing. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a very important question around data privacy and data security, and worldwide as well. This thing has received large number of attention over the last 5 to 10 years, with multiple privacy related concerns being voiced out by larger platforms and how they are going to approach it. Broadly speaking, the way we like to do things at AirAsia is have a central data governance strategy that identifies multiple use cases about what is okay, what is not okay. And see, at the end of the day, we all the data practitioners are also users, and we all understand the kind of limits that should be executed upon any of the projects. No one likes their personal data to be misused at the end of the day. That's something that, and none of the data practitioners would also like to go ahead with a project that does this kind of unethical practice. That's something which is a strict no-no. Having said that, there is large amount of useful data that can be garnered from users' accounts that can be used to be able to make their lives easier. So if looking at different users, if I as a data practitioner am able to identify the needs of different users and how to satisfy those needs, at the end of the day, that is something that I should be open to do. And while it's a sensitive question and the answer will keep on evolving as we get better clarity over what is right and what is wrong, and these answers I understand differ by geographies as well. But at the end of the day, for data practitioners, just answer the question for yourself. Would you be okay if someone else did this for you? And that should give you some guiding light.
Yeah. So
yeah, Mark, any thoughts?
Let me add on to that, right? So, there's two dimensions to data security and compliance to the PDPA or GDPR. So within each organization, every of these organizations must have their own internal guidelines, processes, and policies coming to the use of data and data privacy, right? So that's one key part as well. But there's another dimension to it, is the partners that you work with, right? On the external side, you've got to make sure that they do practice and they do have the same data compliance. The vendor that you work with must have the same standards as well, right? Compliance to GDPR, PDPA, then of course compliance to SOC 2, ISO, or PCI DSS, right? So that it complements both your internal processes as well as the partner that you work with, right? Have an end-to-end process on data security and compliance.
Yeah, I think so. Regional policy is definitely important as well to monitor, and I think essentially to look back the questions about data as well, and again digital transformation. I think we have questions from Andy. As a tech guy, one of my common challenges is to convince my non-tech boss to invest in data stack, right? So we all know the importance of it. So he say that by showing the project ROI, he don't have that. So any tips maybe so that Andy can convince his non-tech boss? Maybe from Mark first and then Max.
Well, I think probably Max will be in a much better position to answer for that. And let me add on to that, from a vendor perspective.
Sure. In terms of that, I would argue from a time saved perspective and multiply that by the number of salaries that are paid to the people that are involved in making these decisions. So really understand what kind of decisions the business needs to make on a day-to-day basis, understand how long a time it takes to make those decisions and how many people are involved, and then present that to your leader, because that should relatively quickly become a pretty unbeatable argument. And you don't have to start, when it comes to data tech stacks, right? You don't have to start with giant stacks and all these kind of things. Like if you have services like Ivan, you can get a lot of infrastructure relatively quickly with very little development effort up into something that you can use as a stack. For example, I think our stack on Ivan currently is less than 4K a month. If you add some other tools on top of it, like I'm running my whole software department and my product at less than 11K at the moment, including a fully data stack that includes Looker from Google, which is a paid BI solution. And it's running performant and it's managing 25,000 IoT devices that stream over 400 data points per second into my database. So you can get these kind of stacks at a very cheap and very quick setup cost these days. That's something that I think if you then figure out the decision-making cost, you should be able to come to an ROI relatively nicely.
Mm-hmm.
But again, at the basis of it is you have to understand what's going on in your business and what kind of data you have. So it keeps coming back to that information model, really sitting down and thinking about the information that you have on your record and understanding that.
Right. Yeah. So Andy, a quick response to you on your question, right, is always looking at tech to be an enabler rather than a means to an end, right? So using some of our customers as an example. Who are involved now in the fast delivery business, right? Some are now committing to 60 minutes. Some of customers are committing to 90 minutes. So there's a difference between 30 minutes there, right? So it's about now asking for your boss, maybe he's a CEO, right? What does it mean to the business if you can now move from 90 minutes to 60 minutes in your fast delivery, right? Using tech to manage it. Right. And in this case here, it's about being competitive and what's the additional revenue you can generate from that. Right. But it means that you're now having to use tech to address some of the business challenges, for example, trying to coordinate with the riders going to their hubs to pick up the goods, and if an accident happens or traffic jam. So how much is that worth when you're addressing business challenges like that? Right. So and maybe in the form of AirAsia, it's about, okay, now is my passenger load on the plane. How do I improve that? So it all boils down to what that technology is enabling and what's the business value for that, right? So that you can actually now look at technology as an enabler to bring the business forward, rather than looking at technology just as a means to an end. I hope that makes sense to you and is helpful to you, Andy.
Yeah. So Andy, everyone giving you a tip on how to convince your boss. But and I think basically we have time for one last question. So I'm gonna merge a couple of questions as a final round for everyone, and I think I'm going to merge a question from the chat from Chong Ye Sai, and also from another one. What is the magic step between using data and increasing revenue? Using data? Question mark, increase revenue. And also last we know which platform or infrastructure is the best for what we do. So any kind of like tips also on the platform? Maybe the first question for Mr. Rohit first, and Max, and then last for Bart.
Sure.
It's an iterative process. So what I strictly believe, like in the age of agile development, it's not a straightforward question as to how we can use data to be able to generate revenues. We look at data, and this can probably happen over multiple iterations to really identify what the current state of affairs is. Then the next step would be to be able to use data to be identify where the maximum amount of inefficiency is. That leads to the next question as to how we can use data to be able to improve the performance, the operational performance or whatever performance. And then the final thing of relating the effort, the data related effort, into the impact of this data related project. What I like to do is spend large amount of time on identifying what are the key priorities to be picked up using data. The key priority that can be picked up has to be a combination of something that is a real use case for the business, that is significantly, that has a significantly large impact, and that has the ability of being solved using data. And we also need the relevant infrastructure, the resources, the team to be able to work upon that. Only when a project falls in the combination of these four areas is when we really pick up a project to be able to execute upon that. That ensures that we have an assurance from the business stakeholder that the solution will be implemented in practice to be able to reach the desired effort or meet the desired goals that we want to achieve. So it's really a collaborative effort. It's also an iterative effort because we try multiple things, we figure out what's working, what's not working, and as a result, we iterate on the process to be able to achieve the goal that we want to achieve.
And then last question for Mark and Max about which platform? As well.
I can just reiterate what I said earlier. Like there is no right or wrong answer for platform or infrastructure. It is absolutely dependent on what your specific needs are, right? So if you have time series data, which financial applications often have, like transactions data, these kind of things, you probably want to look for a database that is that supports that very efficiently. If you have large unstructured database, then it's NoSQL, and all the cloud providers offer different solutions for that. So there's no right or wrong answer to that, other than also what Mark said is like you want to avoid lock-in. So looking at trying to decouple your technology from your infrastructure is a good idea. So like I can run a Postgres database on Amazon, on DigitalOcean, on Google, or wherever I want, right? It's just a Postgres database. So I chose Postgres because it is a relational database that I'm after. And then I can separately choose which infrastructure I'm running it on. And that's, I think, is a good sort of rule of thumb. Don't sort of like buy into, especially with your database, because that's going to be one core aspect of your business, especially when you scale. There's one sort of rule that a lot of people learn the hard way, which is that your application will most likely change, but your data model, your information model will not. Like your information is an image of reality that doesn't change that much, but you'll probably put another front end or a different technology or a different device or different something else on top of your data. So your data model will live with you much, much longer than any application that you build will. So being flexible and well structured there is a good idea, and not sort of being locked into a particular vendor or platform.
Thank you so much, Mac. And I think it's a really good segue directly to our last discussion for this webinar, which is about the cluster program, which Mark, the floor is yours. Maybe you want to share a little bit to our audience about your cluster program?
Yeah, so it actually answers part of that question about what platform or infrastructure is right for you, right? So the cluster program is, the way that Ivan would like to return back to the startup ecosystem. So what we are offering is to any startup who will register for the cluster program, right, will get and for those that are successful, will get $100,000 credit in terms of data infrastructure credits from us, with no with no conditions tied to it, right? So we are not asking for any equity. We are not asking for a formal review process on how you spend it. Our main goal here is really to help the deserving startup to be able to grow quickly and bring along the growth of the whole startup ecosystem, to bring along the next wave of startups to grow fast, right? So that's our aim. It's awarded on a quarterly basis. So any startup that would like to join this program, it should register with us, and we go through a quarterly review and qualification process to select and shortlist and award the startups who are deserving of these 100,000 credits, right, to help them to grow faster. So that's the intent of the Ivan Cluster program.
Yeah, and I think actually someone shared also the Ivan cluster on the chat. So I ask everyone, if you're wondering about the chat as well, feel free to also click the link down below as well. And also I have a poll here right at the end of the webinar. I think we're right on time to basically let us know if you actually want to know more about the Ivan Startup Cluster program as well, so that we can essentially get back to you as well. All right, well, essentially, I think that's all for our events and our webinar. It's been a very fruitful discussion, and we're very, very happy to have a very interactive webinar this afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone, for actively participating. And I'm just sharing here as well, in case you guys want to see other events that E27 arranged. And of course, please use the poll for essentially letting us get back to you whether you wanted to know about the cluster program as well. And don't forget, actually type in everyone panelist name, check their LinkedIn, connect with everyone in case you guys want to connect with everyone else as well. They're on LinkedIn. So that's all. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for coming in. And now we're done.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye. It's a pleasure. Yeah. Thank you, Ari. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Tony. All right. I'm closing it soon then. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice afternoon. Looking forward to have you back with us on the next one. All right. I'm going to close it very soon.